Hello and welcome to this London Embroidery School Stitchalong. Thanks for joining me today, and I'm going to be working on one of our newest kits, which is our Pastel Lace Applique Kit. And I thought today that I would take you through how I'm going to approach applying the lace to this particular white shirt. Now, if you haven't already seen it, I have just posted a photo on our main feed of the shirt and the lace kit that I'm going to use on it. And it's just a very plain white shirt that I really think needs a little bit of attention. So what we're going to do is to just sort of zhuzh it up a little bit today. It does also have a small stain on the back of the shoulder. And so I've been struggling to get that out, and as it's a white shirt, it's quite obvious. So what I'm going to do is to use the Lace Applique Pastel coloured kit to apply some lace over that and give the whole shirt a little bit of a lift, make it a bit more beautiful than it already has been, and yeah, just give it a bit more life, covering over that stain, making it all better effectively. Now, the bit that I'm working on today, this is the front with the pocket from the chest. If you can see, it's got a cute little Peter Pan collar, which is why I want to kind of salvage this shirt and give it a bit more life, because I think there's a fair bit more wear in it. And what I thought would be really cute would be to sort of have the lace like grow out of the chest pocket and then come up and go round the shoulder. And if you can see, there's the little bit of damage there at the back. So I hope this is going to be of interest to you guys today. We haven't really covered that much about kind of the design approach of applying some of our embroidery techniques to some of your own pieces. And I think that this is obviously a very pressing and important issue where embroidery can really sort of help towards creating, more sustainable practices. And I particularly think that if you have an item that you really like and, it's got a bit of a story, a bit of a history to it, but you want to either give it a new lease of life if it's looking a little bit dated or just a little bit overly worn, or if it, needs some help because, as part of its story, it has got damaged through you wearing and loving it, or in fact, if you are already kind of looking into ways to be more sustainable yourself and are sort of purchasing secondhand, perhaps you've bought something that has some damage from somebody else and you want to make it your own. And I think that this is one of the very many ways that embroidery can be really useful in bringing that new life and vitality to your wardrobe. So I'm going to start in the usual manner, sort of fixing the center. I have pre-prepared my lace, as you can probably tell. And as you saw me doing at the start, I did sort of cut some of the bottom motif off because I want it to sort of come out of the pocket. And so what I'm thinking is that, we'll have it sort of coming from this right-hand side of the pocket. The pocket sits on the left-hand side of the wearer's chest. And this bit's obviously going to come over, this is the arm seam here. And then it starts to come up. And then perhaps what we can do is then start to bring in some of the other colours of lace and sort of like build onto this as a design. And I also thought that maybe some of these smaller pieces might be quite sort of cute to come out. Maybe that one's not quite the right shape. Maybe it's more like this. Yeah. Maybe we tuck that one into sort of this side and it sort of spills out the top side of this pocket. And we sort of just like let it grow naturally around the garment and up over the neck. That's kind of how I see it happening. As I say though, this as an approach is, from a design aspect is quite sort of, organic. I like to let my projects develop as they will. And with the London Embroidery School classes, I always think that, they're very technique led. We'd rather teach you a technique and then you can go on to do it yourself and apply the skills as you wish, and how they're relevant to you as a maker, as a designer, however you identify yourself. So it just sort of gives you the skills, and that's the bit that really excites us. Now see, that might be quite cute if that little one pops out the side there. What do you think? Yeah, I think that could be really nice. So let's just pin that into place quickly. Sorry. I'm thinking as I'm looking at the moment. Now. Yeah, and I think we pop this one in over here. Is that attached? No. Cute. So cute. Okay. Right, I can see I have a couple of questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them into the comments box below. I will try and answer as many as I can, or as many as I see. Obviously, I am stitching whilst I'm chatting to you guys. So if I miss anything, please do also feel free to direct message us afterwards if there is anything that you pressingly want to know that I don't get round to answering. Equally, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel later, which it will get put up onto, then, feel free to pop any comments in the box below. So the question from Textiles of Amelia V. How is the best way to set up my frame for this? Now, I have been working on this today, and I've got this kind of section that is quite open. As you can see, there's a little area of suppression over here, which is to do with the arm side, which obviously hasn't got great tension. But the section that I'm working on is pretty okay. And so I have just framed up the top as a whole, because this is kind of the front flat section of the chest anyway, which is, pretty convenient for this purpose. However, if you're working on a smaller section or somewhere that it won't lie particularly flat and you're worried about, getting puckering with your embroidery afterwards, you can always window mount your item. And this is where you have another piece of fabric, usually something like a cotton or calico, medium weight, sort of woven, stable, non-stretch fabrics. And you use that as a base out of which you cut a square window, and then you mount your embroidery into the middle of that. So that just sort of allows you to work in this section, and you make sure you keep your embroidery within that window with the item laying over the top, tack it into place, then work into the window, and it allows you to get good tension of a small section of a non-flat item, and work on it without having any backing. Another alternative would be to back the item and just to frame up the backing. So you would use a lightweight fabric, usually something like an organza is quite good for that, or a net, but it needs to be sort of, again, non-stretch. So there, you can find a few around. They can be a little bit tricky to find these days. And you frame up with the backing, and then that allows you to work onto that through both layers, unlike the window mounting. The window mounting creates a window for you to work into, but the backing means that you put all of the framing pressure onto the backing fabric instead of your garment. And so that's quite a good approach for items that are particularly delicate or particularly awkwardly shaped. If you can get that small area flat enough, basically. That's the key with embroidery and framing up. It's always going to be that you need to flatten out the section that you want to work on. So I hope that answers your question. We do have a series of pro tips in which you will find some helpful hints about things like window mounting. We have a video that's just about that, so do check those out if you're not familiar with what we offer. That you can find on our YouTube channel, as well as a blog on our website. And I don't know if you guys know about our blog, but we blog a lot. And so if you are interested in reading a little bit about embroidery things that we have going on, and new classes and techniques and thoughts we have and pro tips, then do have a look on there. Particularly if you're not so keen on, for example, YouTube, then that's another way that you can interact with us that might suit you a little bit better. Speaking of blogs, we do have a new blog up today, which is a similar sort of approach actually to what I'm working on here. And again, sort of falls into this kind of idea of sustainable textiles and making your wardrobe work for you. And that is a Embroidery Anglaise blog, where we have used Embroidery Anglaise to repair another item that was damaged. This time it was a top, a smock top that belongs to one of my colleagues, and it had a couple of quite large holes in it. Now, those of you that are familiar with Embroidery Anglaise, it is a technique of lace where you create holes or eyelets that you finish with embroidery around the edge to create a pattern. And so this blog that we've written on there is actually about how my colleague approached using the Embroidery Anglaise techniques as taught in our online class to fix those holes and build them into a design, again, that sort of now embellishes that top as a whole. So if that sounds like it's of interest to you, do have a little look at that going up on our website today. I think it goes up at 11 o'clock. So, you know, obviously once you're done with me over here and chatting with me while I talk about this kind of lace, you can head over there and have another look at a different type of lace if you wish. I can see that I'm also being asked, is this class we can access on the London Embroidery School website? Yes, it is. So all the techniques that I'm working with here are from the Lace Applique online class. The Lace Applique online class now has the choice of this pastel kit, which gives you 3 pieces of lace along with a backing fabric. So you get a grey one, a pink one and a lilac one, which are really lovely. So you get a lot of lace with the pastel kit, or you can go for the original kit, which is white. It looks a little bit like this. As you can see, it's exactly the same lace pattern for both, so it doesn't matter which kit you go for. But if you go for the original kit, you just get 1 piece of lace to work with, and so you will be creating something that in the end sort of looks a little bit more like so. If you go for the pastel kit like I'm working with today, that's more approached that we kind of expect you to want to approach it for your own items, and so you get a fair bit more lace, so you've got a bit more things to play with and opportunities to make your item beautiful and usable. The pastel lace kit was inspired by Netflix's Bridgerton. I'm sure you've seen it. I certainly have. And we found that actually the series and the costumes were really quite inspiring, hence why we have created a lace kit around the colour palette that has become so synonymous with Bridgerton. And I just think that, sort of bringing these pastel colours into your wardrobe is a really nice way to add a little bit of colour that's not sort of too punchy, and kind of plays into that romantic cottagecore sort of feel that is definitely trending at the moment. But I don't know. I think that sort of classic, beautiful floral things are never really go out of style. In my opinion, anyways. Let me just check for any other messages. Thank you for those of you who are commenting down below. It's lovely to hear from you. I always like to have people to chat with. Hence the beauty of these stitch-alongs in the first place. So I'm just working my way around the lace itself, securing down first the centres and then working the edges. And the wonderful advantage of this particular lace is that it is a corded lace, meaning that it has this sort of strong cord edging to the lace design itself, as well as the fill stitching. And this provides us with a sort of really strong, good, stable section of the lace to work around and stitch down in a method that we call couching. So that just sort of means that I come up, I go over the cord, and then I go straight back down perpendicular to the cord to secure it into place. Now this particular shirt is definitely going to need some more work than I'm likely to be able to achieve in our time together today. But I assure you it will get finished, and hopefully it will be lovely afterwards. And I've taken a few before photos, and we'll try and do some durings, and then obviously we'll show you the finished piece afterwards. And hopefully you can sort of think about how it might serve your own items or wardrobe. You never know what sort of ideas these things might spark and how it might play into actually suiting you and your style. As I mentioned earlier, we are sort of really trying to show you different ways that embroidery can be more than just beautiful. And undoubtedly, I mean, I know I'm terribly biased, but at least I know I'm terribly biased. But, you know, embroidery is lovely in of itself. But we at the London Embroidery School really think that it can be more than just lovely, that it can do things that matter, and that it can achieve sort of ethical approaches that, you know, we're interested in bringing into our own lives. So we do have several classes now that would sort of fit into this kind of more sustainable approach to embroidery or to items in your own life that embroidery can help you with. So of course we have Lace Applique. This is actually the second Lace Applique repair that I have done. I also did a different top that had a really big iron burn on it. That must be last summer now. So if you're faced with something similar, that sort of level of damage, and I mean it was, you know, it both had sort of scorch marks. Some of the fabric had sort of melted slightly because it was a polyester based top, but it was a really lovely shaped top, and so it actually was damaged before its first wear even, so it was really soul destroying that this really lovely shaped top had been purchased and was being prepared to be worn, and then it couldn't even be worn before it was damaged really badly basically. So, yeah, adding that little bit of lace applique to it, which you can find on our YouTube channel. In the Stitchalong section, we have a whole section for Stitchalongs, which this video will be joining. I can see somebody is just asking, as they missed the start of the video, if it will be available afterwards. Yes, it will, don't worry. I will be posting it both to Instagram in the videos section, or is it called watch now? I don't know. They keep updating things and changing the algorithm. I don't know. It's a whole black hole. I won't go into that. Anyway, it will be available on Instagram to watch if you wish, but it will also be going up on our YouTube channel, which is probably the easier place to find it, I would say. I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Yes, so Stitchalongs and Lace Applique. Basically, to sum up, Lace Applique is fab, if you haven't got that from me so far. Alongside Lace Applique, in our what you can do with embroidery classes, DIY, mending type, revamp, upcycling, all of those sorts of words, classes, we also have darning. Now, darning, I'm sure you've probably heard of as a repair technique. Now, this one is kind of the opposite approach, because Lace Applique and Preworn glaze, as I've mentioned, both sort of aesthetic approaches that we think could be used for mending. However, darning is a classical sort of mending technique. You think about people saying about darning their socks, for example. But we also think that darning can be quite aesthetically lovely. And so it's sort of the opposite way round, but coming out to the same finished approach and mend effectively. So we have a darning class that teaches you, you know, how to approach a damaged item, which is particularly good for things like denim, because of the way that denim wears, and it tends to, the warp or the weft gives up before the other weave, if that makes sense. So like you can see the white stitching through here remained even after the blue part of the weave had been rubbed away for this particular section. But by using coloured threads, you can kind of make a little bit more of the damage and use it as a visible repair. You know, there's no reason why you kind of shouldn't be proud of having fixed an item, and as I say, adding to its story. There is also, embroidery glaze that you can take in this approach. Check out that new blog, as I mentioned. And the last one that is definitely of this group is our newest class up, which is called Fixing with Florals. Now, this very conveniently is about mending with embroidery stitches, and we talk through how you should approach first stabilising the damage to your item, and then covering it over with embroidery stitches that are particularly good for disguising damage, by kind of them being mostly sort of 3D surface stitches. Now, what I mean by this is something along the lines of this jumper here. So you can see it's it was a stretchy, it's a North Face jumper, you know, sort of classic collared neck, and it we sort of go through with you how to create these stitches to cover over any damage you might have. And I also did the sleeves of this particular piece, which I think look really cute. You will, however, notice, or maybe it's a little bit tricky on screen, but these two, positioning-wise, are not a pair. And that's because underneath this rose and underneath this rose were the two main holes. And that's because I recently got a new puppy. I don't know whether you guys will have sort of heard him at all in the background. You might hear him padding around. Or God forbid, if somebody comes to the door, then, you know, you might hear him sing his song to you. But unsurprisingly, in his first sort of few weeks of being at home, there are a fair few items of mine that have been damaged slightly by the, you know, the crazy puppy teeth. So anyway, they're on their way out now, you'll be glad to hear. But it does mean that I've had a fair few items that needed mending. You know, things like that particular jumper, lovely to have and really comfortable. And apart from the puppy inflicted damage, there's a lot of wear in that jumper yet, but it looked really, you know, unloved and pretty sad for having those holes. It, you know, it sort of made me look a little bit like I didn't know how to take care of myself. So adding the embroidery to that sort of allows you to, give that new lease of life to the item, because life happens and things happen to the items that we wear, and it doesn't always mean that it's the end of their life cycle. The piece isn't worn out, it's just a little bit damaged. Sorry, I'm just going to check the messages quickly. I've got a question here. Why do you tap the fabric with the needle before threading it through the applique? Actually, that's just probably a little bit of a habit of mine that you have very observantly noticed. It's to do with the fact that I stitch with both hands. So you'll notice that only my left hand stays on the surface of the fabric and the right hand stays underneath. This is facilitated because I am currently working on a table clamp frame, which allows me to stitch with both hands because I don't need to have one hand holding the hoop, a loose hoop that is. And so as I bring the thread through the fabric, it sort of just gives me the ability to sort of turn the needle a little bit more lazily. Actually, it's not a great habit, not gonna lie. But yes, you very observantly have noticed that is something I do. It's sort of like I find that the needle gets caught in the fabric, and so you can sort of control it a little bit easier as you turn it in your hand, because obviously it's facing upwards as it comes through the fabric, and then I need it to be downwards, but that's kind of quite a weird angle, so I tend to use the fabric to readjust how I'm holding the needle. If you are curious about how to stitch with both hands, as I mentioned, that is something else that we have a pro tip on, available on our YouTube channel and on our blog, if you want to try it for yourself, because it really is the fastest way to stitch. It's one of those things that as you progress in your embroidery journey, you may well find that you sort of get to a point with your stitching and you can't really go any faster, and so stitching with both hands is the next step on that sort of brings you up to being closer to a professional standard. It means that you don't waste the time passing the hand above and below the hoop. Both hands are just in the right position. It does, however, mean that both hands are equally important to the stitching, and so you do have to work at usually developing your non-dominant hand to be as strong stitching wise and as precise as your dominant hand. So for me, I'm right-handed, and so I have my right hand underneath the frame, and then my weaker hand, my left hand, is on top and has the advantage of also having my eyes, as with the right hand, because I know it's more precise being my dominant hand. I sort of have learned to trust it to find the right position without the help of my eyes, effectively. But thank you for that question. What am I doing? There we go. Any others? Feel free to send them over. Yes, I can see the same person saying, I thought it was a special technique. No, just my bad habits. Sorry. You can do better. I believe you can do better than me. So try not to build that into your repertoire of stitching if you do try stitching with both hands. Right, so I'm coming to the end of this second thread. Oh, and I'm nearly joined up with where I finished with the first thread. So I don't like to let my threads get too short because it starts to affect your tension. You pull too hard because the thread is kind of shorter than is comfortable. So let's see if we can get to the end of this one. My goodness, and I've already been chatting away for half an hour. How does the time fly? So I'm just going to knot this thread off with a series of little stab stitches. And when I start a new thread, I like to start with a fingertip to elbow length thread. It's one of those things that people sort of don't really give that much thought to, but actually it can really affect the quality of your stitching based on how long your thread is and how accurate you can be with that thread. And this is because fingertip to elbow length is quite a good it's quite a good length to make sure that you have good control. Let's take some of these pins out. And what I mean by that is that basically your the thread is only as long really as kind of your forearm, being fingertip to elbow length. And so you don't need to bring the shoulder joint into the movement so much. That's where things start to get quite messy. When you're stitching, obviously the fingers are working really hard and the wrist is working really hard, and you're sort of adjusting what you're doing with that wrist. And as to a certain amount, the elbow is obviously working with you too. But the thing you don't want to do is to bring that shoulder joint into the movement that's required to make a stitch. Aside from the fact that you would be quite likely to accidentally stab anyone in your close vicinity, and let me tell you, in an embroidery studio, that can be a real risk, getting kind of stabbed while you walk past somebody who's in the stitching zone. But if you just sort of have it as fingertip to elbow length, that shoulder doesn't really need to come into the movement, and you are much more able to stitch for longer periods because your body doesn't get quite so fatigued, which is obviously something that we do have to consider when you're working as a professional embroiderer, and thinking about stitching for hours at a time, hours and hours, full working days. The longevity of it and your comfort as a professional person are really factors that have to be taken into consideration and have to be reflected in your technique if you are going to be able to do your craft for a long time, and continue to enjoy doing it as well, which is a big factor of it. We like to think about how to make sure that the way that you're approaching your stitching is, for your body, sustainable and comfortable. Because quite honestly, if you're doing something, particularly if it's new, and you're not comfortable, you're not going to do it for very long. And the only way to really make sure that happens is to approach it in the most, dare I say, healthy way? Ergonomic way, I think, is a better word for that. But I'm sure you can sort of see what I mean. And that's why we try to introduce you to these sort of thoughts that we have as professional embroiderers and approaches that we take that allow us to do this for, as long and as much as we do. Now, I appreciate that quite a lot of you will, probably not be looking to try and stitch for 8 hours at a go. That you are more likely to do this as your fun time, as a hobby. But as I say, even when it's as a hobby, you want to make sure that you're doing it, in the most ergonomic way you can. And then you can do it for as long as you want to. And it not be that you have to stop because, your back is killing you, or your neck is aching, or you've given yourself a headache because you're sitting in a weird position. Any of those things, which I'm sure all of us as craft enthusiasts have done to ourselves at some point. So you can see that I've moved on to this little pink section, which we've just got sort of sprouting out of the pocket here. And from a design aspect, I always think it's quite nice if you've got somewhere sort of for things to naturally start from, particularly when you're working with like natural forms like this lace is. You know, it's very floral, it's got like lots of lovely leaves in it and swirls. Then, you know, sort of having a grounding point for that to start from. And then you can sort of just like let it organically work its way up and around the item. As I say, it's going to come around this neckline, probably still peek out a little bit from underneath the collar is my sort of rough thoughts at the moment. Thinking about the design approach of embroidery pieces when you're working on an item of your own is perhaps something that maybe you'd like us to go into a bit more detail about. It is something that I talk quite a lot about in the Fixing with Florals class. That is because that class is a class only, online class only. It doesn't come with a kit, is what I mean by that. So the whole approach of the class is that you work on your own item and fix it, as the name suggests. And therefore, everyone's is going to be slightly different because everyone's is going to be influenced by where the damage is and what needs to be done to it to fix it. So we talk quite a lot in that class about, you know, how you can think about approaching your embroidery design and making the class techniques that I go through with you work for you on your item within the kind of bounds of what you have in front of you, which obviously at that point I don't know what you're working on, but we talk about how you can approach designing around your damage, what you might like to do to make it look more grounded or just generally considered. And then, of course, afterwards talking about how to actually do the stitches that make the repair. As you can see with the lace applique, one of the big things that we talk about is breaking down the lace pieces, because you, in the kit, are obviously given pieces a little bit like so. You know, they're a whole motif and they come with the tulle around the edge. And part of the joy of lace applique, for me at least, is sort of taking this, breaking it down into smaller pieces that are more usable and better shaped to then add on to your item, and taking different parts of the motif and building with them. I think it's a really interesting approach, a really nice way to have a project develop naturally. And so it doesn't really quite so much become a how-to, but more like what happened. Because one of the wonderful things that I would love you to take away from this chat today is to think about when you're working on an item like this, letting it develop quite naturally. You know, when we're working on embroidery, it's normally quite small sections. You know, you're looking really close. And it's really important to take a step back from your embroidery, to look at it from a distance and to continue to assess whether what you are doing and your positioning of the embroidery, is it looking the way you want it to? Is it serving the purpose that you had in mind for it? And providing, you know, that it is, then you can carry on. If it's not, then maybe you need to change your approach slightly. But allowing the space for that to develop naturally is a really important part of stitching, in my opinion, and sort of self-assessing the creative process. And don't be afraid for it to change partway through. It's often part of the excitement. Right, I think we need to thread up a new thread. I had prepared several needles, but I've finished them all. I'm just too speedy. Anyway, we'll go back to the grey. So this one can come out now. That's secure. This is secure down here. Lovely. Yeah, so this one is secure too. So we've just... Oh no, we went up here. This is the thing for me for embroidery, is that I now realise that, you know, I've been around and actually done a lot more stitching than I thought I was going to. And I just get into like a sort of, I don't know, almost like a trance. I'm working and I'm not really even that much thinking about what I'm doing. It's just sort of following the motion of the stitching. And I think that that's kind of almost meditative state that you can achieve if you're not sort of gabbing away like I am talking about embroidery, is a real benefit of embroidery for people, for, you know, your sort of mental health and enjoyment. And you never sort of really realise what you can achieve even when you're not even really thinking about it. You're just sort of stitching and enjoying it. And I don't know, for me, I love the fact that you can just chat away whilst you stitch with other people. It can be incredibly social. You know, if you've got a group of friends that want to stitch with you, or you know, family that you can chat to whilst you're working, you can have the telly on and watch something interesting whilst you're working, and it not really be that taxing. Well, it isn't for me, at least. And I think probably if you're joining me and are interested in watching this, then you likely feel similarly, I would say. Let me know if I'm right or wrong about that. So I'm just working my way around this little bit of floral motif down here. And then I've just got this loose section, and this whole piece then is done. Which does show you that, in fact, lace applique can be quite a fast embroidery technique. Now, that sounds a little bit oxymoronic, because embroidery is generally not fast. But you do get quite decent coverage quite quickly, considering, you know, I've been chatting away with you guys and have been working for, 45 minutes? You know, we have quite a decent amount of coverage here. I'm quite pleased with that. So if you are looking to create a lot of surface, then lace applique can be a really great way to do that, to cover over a big surface relatively quickly. Because if you were to do this in, say, like silk shading or something, it would, it'd be taking you a long, long time. Potentially easily sort of tens of hours, if not into the hundreds, if you were to do a whole sort of shirt of what I am anticipating on doing with this particular shirt. But given the current rate, I will expect that this project will maybe take, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours to work through the 3 pieces of lace that you get in the Pastel Lace Applique Kit, and take them, as I say, up and around this shirt collar from the pocket. You can see we've got another question here. Where is it? What's your favourite embroidery technique? Oh goodness, that's like trying to choose your favourite child. I'm going to answer that by saying, at the moment, I'm very interested in goldwork. I think it's a really fascinating type of embroidery, and there's so much that can be done in it. The whole premise being that you sort of build up all these different textures, usually working in the same or similar colours. And that allows you to sort of create different surfaces and textures and define shapes within the design. yeah. Also, good boy. Sorry about that. I scared him. The fact that it's all gold is also lovely. I mean, this is a piece of gold work that I have here, and I was just sort of trying out a whole host of different techniques, as you can see. Different sort of approaches with gold work, all in gold, and all of the leaves are different, as you can see. This is just sort of a selection of my favourites that I wanted to try out. You know, you've got some sort of padded leather applique over here. We've got some cutwork pieces. We've got some edgings. We've got lots of couching. We've got passing thread and rococo. We've got some cloth of gold applique. We've got like chain stitch with bullion work over here, basket weave, this chipping, essing, loads of techniques that I think can create so many interesting surfaces that, yeah, this is what's getting me at the moment. If you'd asked me probably, I don't even know, about 5 or 6 months ago, I probably would have said that timbre was my favourite. Because I was sort of really in the zone with working on a timbre piece and really enjoying the cathartic nature of that repetitive process, kind of like I talked about earlier, but with a hook instead of with a needle, which is what timbre is really all about. So, you know, it changes day to day, or at least month to month, project to project. If you want to see more of that goldwork piece or things from me, you can also have a little look at my own YouTube, which is called Taking Time with Tasha. I have several videos on that goldwork piece that I just showed you, and the different techniques that I worked on in that and the sort of development process that you might find interesting. If you want to see more goldwork things or just more embroidery things. Now, I'm sort of coming towards the end of my time where I think Instagram will be kicking me off. So if you have any other burning questions that you want to pose to me whilst you have me live, please do get them in and I'll have a little check through. Otherwise, I will probably leave you shortly. Oh, we have another one here. How was the applique made? So this is a machine corded lace. It is embroidered on a machine that's, I think it's likely to be a Shifley machine, which is basically a very large industrial embroidery machine that allows for embroidery to be done on a roll of like on the roll and make embroidered fabrics, which is what these lace motifs have come from. So yeah, thank you for that question. I hope that sort of answers it for you. Right, I'm coming to the end of this thread, so I will have to leave you here. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are curious about any of our classes and want to know more, they are all available on the website, some with kits, some without. So it depends on whether you want us to post something to you or if you want to work with your own items. There are plenty of options on the website. And if you do have something that has been damaged and you want some inspiration on how you might go about fixing that item, making it more than it already is, as I say, we've got lots of things to hopefully inspire you and then ways that you can achieve that. So do have a little look at them. Otherwise, I will leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Have fun, stay safe, and keep making beautiful things. Bye for now.